Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Thank you so much for downloading the Faith Life Podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Nathan, here with my co-host, Pastor Matt.
Hey guys.
We are so excited to bring you a fresh episode of the Faith Life Podcast. But if you have not done so already, please take a minute, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you downloaded this. And if you're watching it there on YouTube, go ahead and hit like, go ahead and hit subscribe, go ahead and drop a comment. I think that's how the cool kids say it. Drop a comment below.
There it is.
So that we can know you're here. If we were live streaming, I would say lock in chat, but we're not.
That's right. Lock in anyway.
You can
chat.
lock in. If you're watching now, lock in. Here we go. You can email us at podcast@dfchurch.com. That's podcast@dfchurch.com.
Love it.
Love it. We'll get to those listener requests. Wow. I wish we had listener requests. Like, hey, could you play that Amy Grant song?
No, we can't.
And we'd say 30 seconds.
Or we would just say, no, why would you want a Amy Grant song?
I don't know. Which one?
Is this the 80s?
She was 90s.
Late 80s.
Late
Really
80s.
Wasn't the 90s like her fall from grace? So like it was a slow, quick decline?
And speaking of that, we are going to jump right into the news.
Let's go. Speaking of a fall from grace.
Yeah, in the Christian music industry.
Oh, man.
So I think we've even talked a little bit about when these rumors first started coming out. Earlier this year, former DC talker Michael Tate, who then became Newsboys frontman Michael Tate, abruptly left the band like mid-tour or right before they were going to tour. And there was a lot of rumor, speculation, and there was people saying, oh, it's because he was doing drugs or he's secretly gay or et cetera, et cetera. And there was all sorts of fervor and buzzing around of what really happened. Turns out all of that is what really happened. Some charges came out, or not charges, accusations then came out just within the last month of him grooming and inappropriately, non-consensually pursuing college-aged men, and drug, alcohol use, et cetera, et cetera. After all these things came out, the band released a statement saying, we're shocked and horrified. We stand with the victims. Right. We never knew any of this. And then just a couple days ago, he released a statement saying, yep, all that happened. 20 years I've been doing cocaine, and
he basically said the allegations are mostly true.
He said in substance
he might disagree with
true.
some of the details, but yeah, that's a lot.
So we have another prominent Christian figure falling.
Yeah.
What's up with that, Matt? Why is it more now, or is this always how it is?
I think this is always how it has been, unfortunately. And it's not. Yeah, we hear about it more, and we've also, what's the right word, celebritized people more.
Sure.
Than we have in 50 years ago.
Okay.
Right? There were fewer celebrities than there are today.
Elvis?
I feel like everyone's a celebrity today. Right? Elvis was one of them, and he was idolized. So I think this is a good. There's a lot of things we can talk about with this, depending on where you want to take it. But one of the things that it brings me to is the warning against idolizing man. Right?
Absolutely.
Putting any human in the place where only God deserves to be is a problem.
Right.
Because they're human. They're fallen. They're broken. We put them on this pedestal. So even if it were something small, it would still be shattering to people.
Right.
Because we've elevated them so high. And honestly, like, the sad part is this is not uncommon in the industry. There's a lot of pressure for them. There's a lot of expectation for them. There's a lot of isolation for them. You think, oh, they're always surrounded by people.
Right.
But they're not surrounded by people who actually care for them as a person. They're surrounded by people who care for them as a product.
Right.
And so Michael Tate being one of them, he has been a product that CCM's been selling.
Right.
Contemporary Christian music.
Right.
Right. And that puts pressure on you to perform, to be a certain way. There's probably a lot of mental health issues. This is June. It's Men's Mental Health Awareness Month.
That's true.
And I would say that drugs, alcohol, sexual addictions of any kind, those all stem typically from deeper mental issues. which then also stem from deeper spiritual issues.
Right.
I think in his statement, I didn't clearly read the whole thing. I was listening to you read it yesterday. But I think he said something about living a double life.
Yeah, it sounded, I think he said something about it. I think you're right.
I thought the wording when I went back to look at it was something along the lines of like trying to be this holy, righteous, lead you to Jesus person on stage. And then he was something completely different than that off stage. And there's this pressure, I think, because he's been told by other people, this is who you're supposed to be. And when you don't live up to that, oftentimes you can go into the spiral. And so I agree with the Newsboys statement of we stand by the victims. But I also think every time this happens, this should bring a focus of us to help. I mean, not like you and me individually, but just culturally, to stop putting these expectations on common man, right? To stop elevating them into a place where only Jesus belongs, and to make sure that we're a part of a solution in bringing that support and accountability and lessening the expectation of you being Jesus on stage.
Right.
Right. So there's a lot that you can dive in with that, but ultimately it's sad. It's a tragedy. And hopefully it brings to light some of the darker sides of these industries,
right,
so that it can be redeemed and cleaned and purified for Christ and his glory.
Yeah, I think we tend to think about like the Christian music industry or the Christian movie industry or any of these things. As soon as we start saying industry, we have to realize that ultimately they are after one thing, which is to make money.
Right.
They are not a ministry. They are a business that is trying to maximize the amount of money that they get. So as long as you are earning money and not publicly causing a problem for them, I don't think really care what you're doing in your personal life, to be honest. And I've heard other bands talk about that, like how they were a Christian band and at some point, most or all of them ended up leaving the faith, but they still toured and sang the songs and acted like a Christian band because it made money and they were okay with that.
So Adam Aggie, the guy who's now the front man of Newsboys.
Oh, okay.
He was also previously stepped into the front man of Audio Adrenaline when their previous front man stepped away. He actually made some statements in a Facebook group, and he said, "We had obviously heard rumors over the years, and each time something came up, we tried to find the source and no one would tell us. We asked Tate each time something would come up and he would deny emphatically. He called a meeting the first week of January." This is what you were just talking about when this stuff first started coming out. And none of us knew that the next day we would be a 4-piece band instead of a 5-piece band.
Wow.
He goes on, "That's the truth, and you can believe it or not. I hate all of this, and I think it's incredibly sad. I'm so sorry for the victims. I'm proud of them for having the courage to speak up. More coming soon. Love you all." And so I think that's probably very common in this industry. There's always rumors, and there's probably assumption that something's true. Something is behind those rumors,
right?
But without clear evidence,
yeah,
what can you do, right? Without someone actually coming forward and saying, "Yes, this happened to me," or "Yes, I witnessed it." Right. What can you do?
That's got to be tough.
And that's in every area too, right? In our own personal interactions with people, it's, "Oh, well, I heard this," but
if you confront the person about it and they say no, then it's like, "Well, I know you. I guess I'll believe you."
Right.
It's like the same thing that happened with Orange, the big Christian curriculum, and Reggie Joiner. Thank you. Who at first it seemed like was just having an affair with somebody. And then as more and more came out, it was like, no, this has been a habit of, grooming and pursuing these relationships. And it's like, man, this has been decades of it.
And that's what's so sad, because culturally, decades ago, the victims were often blamed.
Right.
And so no one would come forward.
Right.
And so I think the good news is we're living in a culture now where that is starting to shift.
Right.
And victims now feel like they are empowered to share the truth of what happened to them,
Absolutely.
to confront bullies, for lack of a better word, whoever the aggressor is in the situation, and then not have the victim be blamed for it.
Right.
It does still happen. There's still pockets of people where it's like, well, what did you do to deserve this type of thing? And that is totally the wrong way to go. Thankfully, I think the majority of our world today is taking rumors rather than taking it with a grain of salt and trying to dismiss it. It's, well, okay, these rumors came from somewhere. Let's investigate the truth.
Now, what's unfortunate is that there are still the examples of people blaming somebody and their lives get ruined, and it turns out it was all just made up. And it's like, that just makes it so hard for anything that really happened.
Yeah.
And I think in this specific with Michael Tate, you have an added layer of difficulty with it being male victims. I think there is definitely, we were talking a little bit about this yesterday, Matt, that there's a little bit harder of a cultural thing for a man to come forward and say he was sexually abused for a multitude of reasons we could talk about. But I would wonder with this one, if some of the reason it went so long without anybody coming out about it and saying what was happening is because with male victims, that's more likely.
So there's an article by Justin Siracic. I don't know exactly how to say his name. He's been involved in the Christian music industry for many years. And so in his kind of little blog about this situation, he says this: I've seen a few comments from people not necessarily victim blaming, but also putting the responsibility on the 3 adult men who allowed themselves to be put in this situation. So what you were just saying, right? Like people are blaming the other guys. Yep. While this might be true, you have to try and put yourself in their shoes. You're 22. You're trying to break into a cutthroat industry. And one of the largest figures in the space takes a friendly interest in you. He's inviting you to a party to hang with the boys. This is a surefire way to make it in your brain until it isn't. Then it's not so fun. Tough lesson, lifelong consequences. Then he talks about, when he was 22 and trying to find ways to fit in. This reminds me of what's going on with P. Diddy, right? Yep. The biggest name in the industry says, hey, come and do this, and I got you. Okay. I'm young, it's a little bit hard trying to break in. I don't know anything. And all of a sudden, I'm caught up in stuff that I don't know how to get out of.
Well, and I think with that instance, not the P. Diddy, but what you're saying before, where like they're blaming the guys, there 2 things can be true at once, right? You can make smart choices to not put yourself in a poor position. That doesn't mean that somebody then doing something wrong isn't wrong. Right? Like I could say, if I walked around with a big wad of cash in my hand and a lot of expensive jewelry down a dark alley at night, that would not be a wise choice to do in a dangerous part of the city. That doesn't make it okay that somebody robbed me. They are still completely morally wrong in that action. But there is also, both things are true, right? Like I can try to say, maybe make smart choices. That's fine. In this instance, it was like I saw one guy talking about it where nothing happened. He said it was years later he realized that like somebody was telling him. So I'll secondhand relay this story real quick. He was like a young guy at a Christian college, and the newsboys were there, and he was one of the volunteers who was helped setting it up. And Michael Tate invited him back to the tour bus. He's like, hey, do you want to see my bus? And he was like a young kid. He's like, sweet, that sounds awesome. And he went in and they talked, and he talked about like weightlifting, and Michael Tate showed him his abs and like all these weird things, and then nothing else. And then he left. And then years later, he was telling somebody else about that. This is still before all of this came out. And he was telling, he's like, well, yeah, he was the Michael Tate's secret. Everybody knows he's gay, and he was just probably trying to hit on
like a grooming type of.
And the guy was like, whoa, I never realized that. So it's easy to see why these things happen.
And I want to be careful and say what we're saying here is not at all to blame victims in any way, shape, or form of any sort of abuse or assault, right?
Absolutely.
Everyone is responsible for how they respond and react to 100%. Other things, right? So I'm responsible for my actions. You're not.
100%.
Same with these victims. 100%. Tate is responsible for what he did. The victims are not. What we're trying to say is, at least in our experience, we've made some dumb decisions. Thankfully, nothing terrible happened as a result, right? Maybe some bad consequences, but nothing extremely terrible like what has happened to some of these people.
Absolutely.
It's sad.
So, other things in the news right now, LA has protests and they're spreading nationwide. So, let's talk about this. The first part is the protests in LA. Most of these are related to ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, right? And in California, they are protesting this. They don't believe it's right for people who to be deported. The mass deportation of illegal immigrants. They are protesting that this is happening. Which, first of all, if you want to protest, great, protest. Yep. You've got a First Amendment right. Peacefully assemble, make your opinion known. And it's funny because Trump has said that the main immigration guy, Hogan or whatever his name is. It's something like that. That's his last name.
It's not Hulk Hogan, though.
No, that would be hilarious. Hogarth. Man, I should know all government people, apparently. Has said, obviously, protest if you want. Like, that's your right. You can protest what you want.
Hegseth? Pete?
No, not Pete Hegseth. The other guy, the immigration guy.
Oh.
Hegseth is the military guy.
Secretary of Defense.
The immigration czar or whatever you want to call it. Anyway, but as tends to happen with large groups of people, there has been some violence that has started. And, there's Waymo taxis. The driverless taxis are burning. There's National Guard getting assaulted. There is looting. There is destruction, throwing rocks at police cars, like this kind of thing. It's escalated pretty severely. So, what was crazy to me is like some of it, I saw a news person and I can't believe this person said what they said, which they were talking about how the National Guard getting sent in, just added fire to the fuel, which, okay, there's a conversation about sending in the Marines or the National Guard and everything that they're doing. And this person said it made the situation worse. But then he said, you've got just, a bunch of people who are having fun watching cars burn, and you made it worse by sending the National Guard. And I'm like, wait, what? They're just, they're just guys hanging out, having fun, watching cars burn.
Right.
And you're like, that's not just a having fun type of a thing
there's
to
vandalism,
do.
There's looting, there's all sorts of stuff.
And so I was kind of surprised by that. It's just, I don't know. It's a crazy thing. And then when you start to see, they're lighting a car on fire while they wave the Mexican flag. It's like going into this country illegally and saying, I'm mad that you're enforcing your laws and kicking me out. And so to show that, I'm going to wave the flag of the country that I don't want to go back to.
Right.
Or to show that I've got this issue, I'm going to go into the store and steal a bunch of stuff, because that's what's happening. Looting is now happening. Right. Now, obviously, you could say, well, those people aren't involved in the protest. They're just taking advantage. But again, it's all connected, where that's the image you're showing. Right. And then I saw a video of like Moby. He was posting because he's in LA, and he's like, you might have seen this on the media that we're under all this stuff, but really look. And it was like nothing happening. It was very peaceful. And it's like, well, where you are on that street, that doesn't help.
That one street.
There's other streets where clearly things are on fire. And maybe that's not indicative of everything. I'm sure there are parts where there's just peaceful protesting happening and nobody's burning and looting anything. But they are still, as part of these protests, there's parts where there's looting, rioting, and burning of cars.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sad because then unfortunately, it lumps everyone into... Even if it's the minority of the people protesting are the ones that are looting and vandalizing, it lumps everyone into that same category from those who are outside, which is unfortunate because there are people who, like you said, they're peacefully protesting. There is some sort of sense of injustice that they're trying to get their voice heard for. And so that I'm fine with.
Well,
like absolutely. You said, the right to peacefully protest is one of the beautiful things here in America that we have. The key word there, though, is peacefully. And so, unfortunately, I think the looters, the vandalizers that are part of the actual riots in LA, they're giving a bad name then to everyone who has any sort of Latino heritage. And so now... It's just causing a greater racial divide when I feel like we've been slowly trying to bridge that gap over the last forever. Right. And so this is just causing more and more racial divides when there is not a need for it. There's a lot of things we can talk about with this, I think. You mentioned it to me earlier this morning about, well, Scripture says to welcome the foreigner into your land, so we need to just let them all be here. Scripture also says obey the laws of the land. And the laws of the land say the foreigners are welcome here. Go through due process.
Right.
Here's how you do it.
Right.
And my question, what I'm wondering, and I don't know if anyone has the answer to this, are those who are rioting and peacefully protesting, both sides of the camps, right? Okay. How many of those people are ones who have gone through the due process? If so, you have nothing to worry about. Why?
You're not getting deported for being here legally. People are being deported, and then it's so crazy because people are saying it's not a crime to be here illegally. I'm like, isn't that?
No, you literally just said illegal, which is crime. Yeah.
And so then they'll say, well, it's only a civil offense. And so I was doing some research on this. They're saying, well, it's only a civil offense, so you shouldn't be deported. And so here's what I found out. To enter the country illegally is a misdemeanor. It is a federal crime. So if you have entered illegally, it is not just a civic offense. It is a federal misdemeanor. It's a crime, and you can get deported. Now, if you are here illegally, it is a civic offense. If you are found to be here illegally, so you might be saying, well, wait, how does that, why would you have one and not the other? So let's say you entered legally through a temporary, like a work visa or something like that, and then you overstay that and they find you, that would be a civic offense and you could just get a fine or deported or whatever. But the problem is it is still illegal to come across the border illegally. It's really, it's like, it is illegal. It is a crime. And they're saying, well, I thought you were going to just deport the ones who were like big criminals and, drug runners and things like that. But it's like anybody who has crossed into the country illegally has committed a crime. You are a criminal at that point.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's like we have a process to come in. Even if you're a refugee, we have a process to come in.
Right.
And so it's not absurd to say we expect that to be followed. Right. Now, this kind of ties into if you're watching this or on the day it comes out, let's come out on Friday the 13th. Ooh, spooky. But then the next day, the 14th, is Flag Day and Trump's birthday, I think. And so that's when they're planning all these big protests, what they're calling No King's Day. Okay. Which is like this big, we don't have a king. We're protesting Trump because we hate him. He's a fascist, blah, 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 blah. Here's what's really funny. A lot of people think this is like a fight the power, this No King's Day protest. And I've seen so many people talking about how they're going to be protesting it. There was a huge ad in the New York Times for No King's Day. And No Kings, June 14th, mobilize. And it's like, we are people of principle and honor. We honor our commitments. We defend against aggression by dictators. We uphold and defend the Constitution, right? It's this big whole thing to promote people protest on the 14th, right? Small print at the bottom. Paid for by Christy Walton. Christy Walton is the Walmart heiress person who right now they're getting slammed by all of Trump's tariffs.
Right.
So are we going to say that there's no connection between somebody trying to fuel these giant protests to really it's just a billionaire who doesn't like that their bottom line is getting hit?
I also heard in LA that Walmart was suddenly selling face shields in bulk. Yep. Like the riot style of face shield in bulk.
Same thing.
Almost like promoting that. That's really interesting coming from.
And here's the other thing that's really different about this one. So the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, is like suing Trump because he sent in the National Guard.
Right.
Now, you would think that during if there's the riots getting this, I think there's another misunderstanding that the National Guard and the Marines getting sent in are not they're against U.S. citizens. They're there to help ICE with the deportations, right? They're not being called in there to attack our people. They're only going to arrest you or do anything to you if you attack them first, right? If you're standing out there protesting peacefully,
nothing's going to happen.
You're going to be fine. But I saw something else that was talking about this. An interesting thing is that when we start to look at the way that the Electoral College votes are distributed, they are based percentagely off population, right? And so the total number of votes never changes. We have 435 or whatever it is, Electoral College votes. That doesn't change. But how many votes each state gets changes whenever we do a census. And your census data they're about to do in 2030 will be at the next big census is based off the number of people there, and it counts illegal people there in the census data. Now, how many people do they estimate are illegally in LA County? It's like 1 million people. If all of those people got deported, does California start to lose a little bit of their electoral college?
Right.
And is there something to the forces behind the scenes pushing against this to say we don't want to lose our political capital, and by doing this, we will. So I think it's easy to think that these are all just like grassroots people out there, but it's like as with everything on both sides of the aisle, there's a lot of big money and power that are behind the scenes helping to steer these things to happen, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I think we've talked about this a lot too, is it is very political, because back in 2020, when Trump lost, Newsom deployed the National Guard in California that he had access to,
right,
to stop people from protesting the election.
That's funny.
And then in 24, he said there's absolutely no reason for the National Guard to ever be, or 25, it's 25 now, to ever be sent out to stop protests from happening.
Right.
So that was kind of a weird thing.
Right.
We've also talked about, I think with the whole ICE situation, maybe we've talked about it, back when Hillary Clinton was campaigning, the big thing that she was standing on was deporting illegal immigrants.
Right.
Now, this has nothing to do with legal immigration, right? Like, the beauty of the United States of America is we are indeed a melting pot. There are so many different cultures represented in the United States, and it's a wonderful thing when done through the right means. Like, I'm not going to go to another country,
right,
illegally, sneak into their borders somehow, and then demand that you provide everything for me, and then riot and wave the flag from the country I left. Right.
Right.
What I'm going to do,
no sense.
If I want to go to another country, I'm going to go through the right process. I'm going to become a citizen of that country through the right ways. And I'm going to support that country and be a productive member of society, ideally. Right.
That's the idea.
Now, I understand people, depending on who's watching this, they might get pushback. I have some extended family that's connected to me who's affected by this. In several different ways. And so I understand the emotional charge of it all and the fear of it. But I also want to remind everyone that there are very effective ways to become a legal citizen of this country. And it honestly isn't as hard as you might think.
Right.
I know people like to say, well, no, most Americans can't pass the test. I actually took one of the tests. I passed it.
Good
so
job.
like, yay, that's the only test I've ever passed in my life. But
That's funny.
yeah, it's just a really interesting dichotomy between the two sides of the political aisle, where if this was coming from Democrats, what would the response of a lot of left-leaning people that I've seen online be versus the Republicans and the right-leaning people, where right now we're like, hoorah, let's go get them all out of here, right? Is what you get from the right side. And the left side, it's, no, this is the worst thing ever. If it were flipped, I'm pretty sure our response would be flipped.
Right. Well,
only because it's who's in office.
Which is, that's a great point to bring up, because you look back at Obama, who's a Democrat. How many people over his 2 terms did he deport? And I was just looking up this number to check what it's at. And it seems it was around 5 million people were deported under Obama.
Wow.
That's a lot of deportations. Now, how many has Trump deported? It's only been 6 months, and it's like 250,000.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe if it continues up, he'll beat Obama by the end of the 4 years if that happens. But illegal border crossings were massively high under the Biden administration, and they've plummeted since. And so it's like, it's okay to say we have a border. Every other country in the world has immigration control, and they have, like, I wouldn't try to go to Canada, sneak across the border, and then expect to have all this stuff done for me, like you're saying. And so it's weird that America is expected by some people to have no standard at all of what this looks like. And it's like, I would wonder with these people who are protesting, is this how their personal life is lived out? Like, do they have doors and locks on their doors? Would they be upset if somebody walked into their house and just started using their resources without any permission or whatever? And probably they would be upset by that. They probably have locks on their doors. They probably have a border to keep people out of their personal space. And so it's not that absurd to say as a country, we have the same kind of standard.
Yeah. And I know we have a lot of people that are angry on both sides of the aisle, right? I'm angry over the protests, or I'm angry over ICE. And I think like those feelings are valid and legitimate, right?
Sure.
Scripture tells us to be peacemakers,
right,
not peacekeepers, which means as Christians, our response shouldn't just be anger and feeling the hate. Our response should be, let's have a conversation. Let's see how we can come to a conclusion with this.
Right.
And I think ultimately, like, the real hope for lasting change isn't in a better policy or a different politician in place.
Right.
It's in Jesus Christ.
Right.
And hearts changed by him and him alone. And so Christians, our response to the riots is to share the love of Jesus, because we're always going to have riots and protests, because we're always angry over things that ultimately, eternally, are irrelevant. So let's focus on the eternal and let that shape our day to day. Let that then shape how we feel about politics or different policies in place or different people coming to different countries. Let the gospel shape how you view the rest of it.
I love that.
Yeah.
So then I think for today, our main topic is just going to be news, like interacting with the world as it is, because everything seems crazy right now. And so that's the next one I wanted to talk about briefly, is in India. There was just in the last day a huge plane crash. Did you hear about this? So it was a Boeing, which doesn't bode well for that company. They've had a lot of bad press lately, and it looked like it was a flight from somewhere in India to England. So it was a long flight that had a lot of fuel on the plane. As it was taking off, it started to go up, and then it kind of lost its altitude, and it crashed into an apartment building. Everybody did not survive this. It was 240 people on the plane, and now people in the apartment complex as well. There was just a huge crash, and it's this terrible tragedy. And it's just, it feels like, and we've talked about this, where it feels like aviation accidents are on the rise, and at least in the US, they're actually not, things are okay. But seeing something like this happen, this is a huge plane crash somewhere else in the world, but it's like, is it really just the case of us hearing more about it? Maybe, but even like full-size airline crashes are pretty rare. And so it's just a tragedy. And so it kind of brings up again, as Christians, what are we supposed to do with this tragedy we hear about on the global scale? And how do we handle that?
Yeah. I mean, we're called to weep with those who weep. Right. And so I think the initial response shouldn't be just indifference and be like, well, it was the other side of the world. It doesn't really affect me. I didn't know anyone. But compassion, right. And hope, prayers specifically for the families of those affected, grief over lost lives, I think is a healthy response. I know, especially in our culture and especially as men, like grief is seen as a weakness, but biblically speaking, grief is a powerful and meaningful expression of emotion. Right. So I think that's okay. While we might not know people specifically affected by this tragedy, we can still share in that pain. Right. That's the empathy. Yeah. Right. And have that. And so I think my first response then as a Christian is to pray for those families, right? Because the sudden and abrupt loss of a loved one,
Right.
it's a long grieving and healing process.
Absolutely.
It also, it reminds me of, Romans 8, right? The whole creation groans,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
We know that this world we live in is not as it should be.
Right.
It is broken. There is groaning. There is hurt. There's pain. There is a deep need for redemption and healing through Christ. And so every tragedy, whether it's Michael Tate, whether it's the riots, whether it's this plane crash, it reminds me of the brokenness, and it points me to a hope that is found only in Jesus.
Right.
Right. John 16:33 says, in this world you'll have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Yeah, you're right. This world we will have trouble.
And
we see it every day.
We can definitely take heart in that. That's good. I love that.
Our only unshakable foundation is in the life and death of Jesus. Everything else is going to be built on sand, right? It's going to be not a good foundation. It's going to be shaky. It's going to lead to hurt, pain, disappointment, heartache. And so, point people towards Christ in the midst of tragedy, always. Point people towards Christ in the midst of celebration too.
Right.
Always, right?
Always.
Like that's our primary role as Christians.
Right.
But I think then the more practical response in these situations, so that's like the big picture thing.
Right.
But I think also we look for ways that we can care and we can give in any tragedy.
Yeah.
Right. Sacrifice of your own time, energy, resources to help others through these grieving process. And I think that shows Jesus significantly more than a post on social media about how you're angry about politics.
Absolutely.
Or fill in the blank, right? Like actual hands and feet of Jesus. Let's get out there. Let's show the love of Christ effectively. And not just sit on the internet and complain.
Right. And find ways to do that in the ways that we are able to where we are right now. We were talking about this in my Sunday school class this last week, where the way that Christianity changed the world, when it first started, this tiny little group in Rome, ancient Rome, not the city, the country, right? It was, and the way that they transformed, because Christianity did change the world, wasn't by these huge, grandiose, like massive things. It was in the little things, the day to day, the way they treated their neighbors, the way they treated each other. It was really what Jesus said. Like they were known by their love for each other, and people saw that, and people didn't understand it. It was not a culturally normal thing to see that type of love for others. That, the examples we talked about is like children were not well cared for in ancient Rome. Like up until 2 or 3 years old, you were discardable, and often kids were just left and abandoned, and Christians would come and adopt them and raise them as their own. That was unheard of at the time. There were places where disease would break out, and so everybody in Roman society would say, well, that's a disease town. We're just going to stay out, and people are on their own and suffering. Christians would say, you know what? It's not about that. It doesn't matter if we live or die. We're going to go in and care for the sick. And they would go into places where disease was going, knowing that they might die, to care for people and help people. And so that is what changes and makes the big difference. If we want to see, when we see so much tragedy and pain and suffering in the world, it's almost overwhelming. Like, what can I do about it? Because we're not God. We can't fix it. We're not going to be the one to do it. And it's easy to say, well, if I can't change the whole world, I might as well not do anything. Whereas instead it's like, well, what can you change? Who in your neighborhood is suffering right now? Yeah, who in your job is struggling right now that you could go out and make a difference in a small way in their life?
Yeah. This all reminds me of a quote from, Brennan Manning in his book, The Ragamuffin Gospel. He says, the greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips, walk out the door, and deny him by their lifestyle. That's what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable.
I've heard this.
Yeah.
It's a famous quote.
It is.
I love that.
And so I think it just reminds us what you were saying, right? That love that radically changes people. Being the hands and feet of Jesus, not just saying we believe him, but actually living like we believe it's true. And we talk about that all the time as Christians. Like, we have to be more than just our words.
Right.
We have to be our actions. Because like James says, a faith without works is dead.
Right.
And I don't know about you, but I don't want to stand before Jesus one day and have him be like, dude, you kind of blew it. Or get behind me, I never knew you.
Right.
Right. And so I want to live for Jesus much more than I talk about him.
Right.
Right. And so I think Christians, we need to lean more towards not just saying we're Christians, but letting other people see that we're Christians by the way that we live and love like Jesus.
I love that. Well, let's bring this to a close today. We're going to, as we kind of go out of that news main topic, both combined, I want to end on a little bit of a lighter note.
Okay.
I've been reading parts out of this humorous book, but I'm going to take a break from that this week. Okay. To bring back an old segment, an old classic chestnut. Ask the AI anything. It's been a while since we've gotten a top 10 list from ChatGPT. And I wanted to ask it, what are the 10... let's see what I asked. A list of the 10 modern signs of the end of the world.
Okay.
So these are what it thinks are the modern signs that we know the world is about to end. You know, we've talked about all this tragedy, destruction. Obviously, that means the world is ending. And here's 10 more signs that's coming true, right? Number 10, someone mistook the rapture for daylight savings time. It says half the church was gone. The other half just forgot to set their clocks. That's pretty good. All right, number 9, a prophecy conference held at Hobby Lobby. Because nothing says apocalypse like 40% off coupon and a shiplap sign that reads, bless this mess.
Okay.
So if you see a prophecy conference held at a Hobby Lobby, you know that Jesus is near.
Okay.
Number 8, everyone's arguing about Revelation on Facebook.
I mean, that happens right now, so that's good.
The real mark of the beast, endless comment threads about the end times.
Oh, yeah.
Amen. Number 7, Left Behind, the Netflix series. Kirk Cameron is now played by Ryan Gosling. I love it. It doesn't say the character's name, Bert or whatever. It says Kirk Cameron is played by Ryan Gosling. So good. Actually, that one's really great. Number 6, the pastor's sneakers cost more than the church van. The only thing holier than his preaching is those limited edition Air Jesuses.
Preacher sneakers.
That was
Look him up on Instagram.
I can tell you, if you can see this right here, my sneakers do not cost more than a church van. These are Adidas, and they are old and worn out.
Got Mikey's on Nikes on clearance for $25.
Dude, that's a good deal.
I know.
That's a great deal.
I only buy shoes on clearance, you guys.
Number 5, church small groups now on Zoom forever. And then it says, where 2 or 3 are logged in, there am I with them, saith the Lord of bandwidth.
Well, it's in the cloud. He's coming on a cloud. That's what it is. He's coming through Zoom.
Here's the thing. We could have a whole discussion on that.
Yeah, we should.
Phrase.
Next. What's next on the AI?
Oh, man. Let us know. Email podcast@dfchurch.com. When you think about Jesus coming on the clouds, do you think about that being a sign of his return? And if you say yes, go back, read Daniel, and because it's the illusion. The Son of Man coming on the clouds is from Daniel.
He went there anyway.
What direction is the Son of Man in Daniel going?
When I think of it, I think of Mario Brothers and the character that's on the cloud. Lakitu, yeah. That's what I think of.
All right, number 4 on the modern signs of the end times. Coffee shops outnumber churches. That's probably already true.
I mean, and a lot of churches have coffee shops in them as well. So,
and somehow every sermon illustration involves a latte.
Oh, I like it a latte.
Oh, number 3. Oh boy, this is going to be something that maybe we talk about next week. I'm going to work on this topic a little bit anyway. TikTok theologians. Okay. If your spiritual mentor is a 14-year-old with ring light and strong opinions on Leviticus, buckle up.
Oh my goodness. Here we go.
A sneak peek for what I kind of want to talk a little bit about digital discipleship and things like that. Gen Alpha, for the most part, trusts social media, online sources, TikTok, places like that as their sources to learn about Jesus. We'll talk more.
That'll be a good conversation.
Number 2, every worship song sounds like the same 4 chords. The worship leader strums G, D, E minor, and C, and everyone wonders if we've been left behind in the bridge.
That's been the last 45 years, though. So
that's a long,
slow process.
But yeah, they do often use those chord structures. All right, number 1, sign of the end times, modern signs. AI now writes your sermon. And sometimes the AI even plagiarizes itself. At this point, even your toaster is giving you devotionals.
I like that the AI plagiarizes itself.
Is part of this? Yeah.
That's kind of funny.
Increasingly, AI is. I mean, I went back to the first episode when ChatGPT-3 came out, and we were talking about it, and it's interesting to see how far, even in this couple
in
years,
a short amount of time,
very short amount of time, how far
crazy.
we've come, and what used to be science fiction or just theoretical is rapidly like there are some people online talking about we have a year to figure out how we're going to survive.
That's crazy.
Once a certain percentage of jobs are just eliminated entirely.
Oh man.
Now, doom and gloom, maybe. But because here's the thing. With every new invention in industry and things coming along, there's always been job elimination. Mm-hmm. When the printing press came out, scribes went away for the most part. Right. But new jobs are usually created by these technologies. And so overall, we still find things that we can do. The difference with AI is that because it's this learning, growing, evolving technology, is that even as new jobs come along, it can theoretically do them.
Right. And it learns and grows faster than
we can.
Yeah.
So it is a little bit of a different scenario. And we have to figure out, how does a society function when all work is handled by machines?
Oh, Lord, come quickly.
Ooh, that'll be fun. Well, we did not get any emails this week, so please take a minute. Email us, podcast@dfchurch.com. Let us know what your thoughts are, how you're going to survive. Do you think your job is AI proof? Let me know what your job is and why. And we will see you next week.
Bye, guys, and happy Father's Day.